Okay, we're really excited to add Cedric and Apu to our roster. These are two guys that we liked a lot throughout the draft process. I know Glenn and Kat talked a little bit about Cedric earlier this evening. Big size receiver, ton of strength, really consistent hands. Very productive when he was on the field for Tennessee, and we're excited to add him to the mix. Workman-like attitude, real quiet. I think he'll fit in really nicely with our group. And then Siaki, he's another player that we really identified early in the scouting process. I think the first thing that stands out is his size, but he actually moves pretty well, especially for like a bigger defensive tackle. We saw him as more scheme versatile, even though he played in an odd front at Baylor. And we really enjoyed our time that we spent with him this spring when he visited us, earlier this month. So two players that we're excited to add, and we're ready to get going with them.
Baylor listed him at 358 in the combine 335. So what is it, and where do you want him to be?
Yeah, so, and this is probably, I'll call it a Schwartzism. He wants guys to be as big as they possibly can without sacrificing their movement ability. So for some guys at defensive tackle, that may be 305. At others, it may be 355. Siaki, he's really, he's been everywhere from, 335 to 355, depending on what the scheme required. For us, we'll work with him when he gets on site for what we're going to ask him to do, but he's played effectively throughout that weight range. His power just really stood out, even with the LSU film. I mean, even at a young age, he was a pretty big human being. And even though he didn't necessarily know what he was doing, he was just kind of part of the rotation, you could see a really big disruptive presence in the middle of the line of scrimmage. And when he was really allowed to attack in the manner that we're going to ask our defensive line to do so, we thought the skills were certainly transferable. I joked with him on his visits, like, okay, what is a 340-pounder doing in the Big 12? That seems like the worst possible conference for you to be in. And I think what was impressive is just that a guy who could keep going in a game that was in a conference that the offenses are really predicated upon space. And I think it was in those moments that we were able to see him do, even though he was in a different scheme, do some of the things that we would really ask him to do here, which is certainly different than what he did in Baylor. And so I think his motor stood out, his power stood out, and we do think that he has understated pass rush.